I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I'm so grateful to be here with you today, and we are going to bring you a very, very special show. Fight. Inside the wildest battle for the White House. My very special guest is Jonathan Allen. Jonathan is an award-winning political reporter at NBC News. He previously worked the Washington bureau chief for Bloomberg News and as White House bureau chief for Politico. He's co-authored 3 prior books with his writing partner, Amy Parnes, 2 of which, HRC and Shattered, became New York Times bestsellers. Amy was going to be with us today, but she has fallen a little ill, and we understand that. But I do want to acknowledge Amy. Amy Parnes is senior political correspondent covering national politics at The Hill. She previously worked as a staff writer at Politico, and during the first Trump administration, she was a CNN political analyst. Amy has also appeared on CBS, NBC, and ABC, and is the co-author of 3 books with Jonathan Allen, including the New York Times bestsellers, HRC, and Shattered. Jonathan Allen, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Good to be with you, Congressman.
So glad that you're here. Jonathan, let me state to my listeners something that I want to make very, very clear at the outset. I am here today to sell books. The book that I want you to go to Amazon and get is called Fight. Inside the wildest battle for the White House. And my producer has asked our engineer to place on the scroll how to reach the agent for HarperCollins. He already has the information. It'll be coming across the scroll because the podcasters and radio talk show hosts that are listening to our program today, I want you to be able to reach out to Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes, one, because their new book is a #1 New York Times bestseller. In my opinion, it's also on its way to Pulitzer Prize consideration, but that's for another day. It details all of the activity in great detail with more than 150 contributors, if you will, sources, some unnamed, some named, some cameos made by some fairly surprising people throughout this book about how Joe Biden was thinking, what he was thinking, how Kamala Harris's campaign came about, how Joe Biden himself and his campaign collapsed, many of the decisions that were made by Speaker Pelosi and Barack Obama and Mr. Clooney and James Clyburn. And it is a magnificently woven narrative that looks, one, at what's taking place on the Democratic side of the political equation, as well as what's taking place on the Republican side, and how this perfect storm comes together in the form of the nation's election last November. Jonathan, this is a brilliant piece of work. Welcome forward again to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I really appreciate the kind words about the book. I know these are all people that you know very well, from President Biden to Speaker Pelosi, President Obama, Vice President Harris, and to hear you say such kind things about a book that goes into the way they were thinking and their motivations means so much to me, because, like I said, you know these folks.
Jonathan, you know, I bought this book when I was in Chicago. I read it once in Chicago. I got up at 2:30 this morning and I said, Jonathan and Amy are going to be on my program at 2:30 this morning. I purchased the audiobook. It's 11 hours and 12 minutes just before the program began. I finished listening to it. And so I wanted to be really, really clear-headed for the next 40 or so minutes that we're going to talk about this program. When we come forward, Jonathan Allen and I are going to dive right into the fight inside the wildest battle for the White House, really the fight of the century. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, we'll be with Jonathan Allen.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, I'm Dominique DePrima, and it's almost time to celebrate KBLA's 4th anniversary, coming up Juneteenth 2025. We'll be marking the achievement with 4 key community events, including a special symposium, luncheon, and brain trust hosted by me entitled The State of Black Women in Los Angeles. Keep it locked here for details on how to join us for this groundbreaking symposium examining the unique challenges, triumphs, and contributions of Black women in Los Angeles in the areas of education, healthcare, community leadership, cultural and political contributions. This public convocation will provide a critical forum to address the specific social, economic, and political realities facing Black women in LA today. We'll go live with a radio broadcast and YouTube live stream, a public discussion, and a private dialogue with some of LA's most impactful women. It's an affirmation of Black women standing at the intersection of race and gender in times of adversity while demonstrating remarkable resilience and leadership. We will listen and we will speak out and be heard, all in service of finding opportunities and solutions. Please plan to join us in celebrating our 4th anniversary by amplifying the voices of Black women. For more on our symposium and 4 events celebrating 4 years on the air, simply stay tuned or keep an eye on KBLA1580.com and help make this Juneteenth more jubilant with all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm. If you own a timeshare, don't miss this public service announcement from Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group.
If you receive an unsolicited phone call or mail piece to discuss selling, renting, or especially canceling your timeshare, don't fall for it. If you really want out of your timeshare, hang the phone up immediately or throw that mail piece in the trash and contact your timeshare resort or Wesley Financial Group for assistance with your timeshare. As the only Inc. 500 timeshare cancellation company, our knowledge, experience, and results has made Wesley a trusted resource for over 40,000 families we've helped get out of their timeshare. Give us a call and I'll send you our timeshare exit information kit free with the straight facts about your timeshare and all of your options for cancellation.
Call for your free info kit, 800-511-2112. That's 800-511-2112. 800-511-2112.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is the author of Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. Jonathan, I don't want to waste any more time. You put the reader of this book in the room where it happens. Let's first start with Biden's stubbornness and the crowd around Joe Biden that did not reveal to the American people whether or not the president was up to the task of running for re-election.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you saw over the course of time, you had a president who won, Joe Biden in 2020, after a pandemic in which he did not have to campaign the way that you would traditionally campaign. And the transition from that campaign into the White House, they continued to kind of keep him bubble wrapped. The pandemic was, I think at first a real reason for that. And I think later became kind of an excuse. But Biden was always in a cocoon during his presidency. And I think that cocoon only grew tighter over time. There were fewer people that saw him regularly that were outside of his inner circle, to include members of Congress, to include, mid-level White House staffers. And you really just had around him what I like to call the poobahs, which were Mike Donnellan, his senior advisor, Steve Ricchetti, a senior advisor, Ron Klain, who was the first chief of staff in his White House. Later, Jeff Zients was the chief of staff, and Anita Dunn, who's a publicity guru in Washington, a communications person who's been around for many years. And and a couple of personal aides. Annie Tomasini, who has been with Biden for many years, and Anthony Bernal, who is the chief of staff for First Lady Jill Biden, and of course the family members. And really outside of that, there weren't many people who saw Joe Biden on a regular basis. And I think what we could see publicly was a decline in President Biden. And anecdotally, you would hear stories from time to time of people who met with him and thought that, he was rambling a lot or lost focus or, had some issues. But the White House, put on a full court pitch to the public and to reporters like myself that the president was fine. They regaled us with stories of, how he was reading through briefing books and, on top of everything. And it just didn't comport with the reality that I think most of us could see on television. All that said, I think, the debate that he had against Donald Trump was, a holy crap moment for a lot of America, where they saw for the first time a president who was not in control of his faculties. And it's scary to think that the leader of the free world, the guy with his finger on the nuclear button, would have, 1 minute that was that foggy, much less an entire debate, and presumably much more than that, Congressman.
Jonathan, before we get to the holy crap moment, we all saw the debate. In your book, you lay out at least two examples. One, a fluorescent tape that they had to put on the ground when Joe Biden walks into a room that he would look down and literally follow to get to his seat or to the markers where he was supposed to be, because he was that disoriented. The other example I think that you set in the book was he went to a standard fundraiser, maybe 50 people in attendance, and he needed a teleprompter. When this is kind of like the standard thing we do when we raise money, we walk into a room with 50 people, we give our pitch, we tell them why the campaign's important. Please be supportive as best you possibly can, yada, yada, yada. But this is certainly evidence that the president was in a struggle that the American people were not aware of, and that Democrats in particular were not aware of. And it took place long before the debate.
Yeah, I mean, the accommodations that that Biden's team was making for him, and you mentioned the fluorescent tape, and look, in politics, if a principal is going into some deeply unfamiliar territory with like complicated labyrinthine hallways to get to where they're going, having a sign pointing a particular way, or maybe some tape on the ground, isn't that unusual. What was so unusual with Biden is he was like going into someone's house, and he needed basically night glow tape on the ground to show him how to get into the backyard. This is not like it's not like it's not like the guy was trying to make his way from one end of China to the other. And so I mean, I think that was part of it. They would do things to hide the physical signs of age. The first thing he would do in the morning was put on makeup to do Zoom calls with his cabinet. I mean, they didn't even want the cabinet to know how old he looked. He would read off of teleprompters or off of printed notes when he had cabinet meetings. Very simple things. Like you said, the fundraiser, he goes to a backyard fundraiser, 50 people. Congressman, not only could you do that in your sleep, I am sure you have done it in your sleep before, made the simple sort of pitch. We have a scene in the book, an anecdote in the book where at the White House the White House congressional picnic in 2023, Biden comes face to face with Eric Swalwell, congressman from California, who was pretty well known as an impeachment manager against Donald Trump, and was very known to Biden because they had been rivals in 2020. They'd been on a debate stage together in 2019, and had actually, gone after each other. And he comes upon Swalwell and doesn't know who Swalwell is, and Swalwell has to kind of cue him and reintroduce himself.
Wow.
And so there were definitely signs. There were people that knew that there was something that was wrong, and nobody blew the whistle. And I think some of that's understandable if you sort of get how politics works in certain politicians. Biden is somebody who has always demanded absolute loyalty, and if you're the person in his midst saying maybe you shouldn't run for another term, maybe you should be the bridge that you said you were going to be to the next generation, and give up power voluntarily, you're going to get kicked out of the room.
So we get to this Jonathan, we get to this holy crap moment, right? And we've all seen it. We all couldn't believe it. Nancy Pelosi's in her condo overlooking the Potomac. Jim Clyburn is somewhere having a Jack and Coke.
Diet Pepsi, sir.
I'm sorry, Diet Pepsi and Jack Daniels. And it becomes crystal clear that the emperor has no clothes. Nancy begins to panic. Jim Clyburn, profoundly concerned, even brought to the point of tears. And then Barack Obama and George Clooney enter stage left to make their move on President Biden. And that treatment of President Biden became a bitterness that extended throughout the entire campaign.
Absolutely, Congressman. It's just it's really sort of an interesting place that Pelosi realizes on debate night that Biden is going to have to be pushed out. But she also understands that he's a proud guy, he's a stubborn guy, and that a sort of direct frontal assault to push him out will have the counterproductive effect of getting his back up. And her concern, as expressed to someone she spoke to at the time, was that they were going to try to get rid of Biden so fast that Harris would be put in immediately. And she didn't think Kamala Harris could win. She didn't think Kamala Harris was a particularly good candidate, didn't think she was a capable politician. I think Barack Obama had very much the same conclusion. He was much more, he didn't want his fingerprints on it, though. And so he's moving behind the scenes to try to get a mini primary or an open convention. And he is asking Biden in the way that President Obama does. Instead of saying, Joe, maybe you should get out, he's saying, Joe, what's your path to get back from where what's your path back to getting even with Trump? And Biden is supposed to understand that as, maybe you should get out. And these relationships end up destroyed. And I think, you would know this better than I would. I don't think I've ever been around anybody who's more effective at maneuvering behind the scenes than Nancy Pelosi is. And I think she didn't want to do this to Joe Biden. She likes Joe Biden. They have a similar background. Their families come from the same part of the country. They're both Catholic. They both worshiped JFK growing up. They have a lot in common, and they got a lot done, legislatively together. And she appreciated that Biden would get his hands dirty in Congress, that he would, he was somebody who wanted to go meet with members of Congress. He wanted to sway them himself, which is different than President Obama, who largely wanted to kind of float above the fray. And at the end of the day, she just thought that she thought that if Biden stayed in, Democrats would lose not only the presidency, but also the Senate and the House, which of course they ended up doing anyway. But her role in this is just fascinating, and all the details are in the book.
One of the great things that became increasingly clear to me over the course of this read was that I'm not convinced, and I'm first of all, again, brilliantly written book. Fight inside the wildest battle for the White House. Get the book, because you can't discuss or talk about what happened last November unless you have the play-by-play detailed analysis that Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes offer in this book that's already a New York Times bestseller. But let me be clear. I often share with our listeners on this program that from 1619 to the Declaration of Independence, African Americans and brown voters, we were here. Red voters, red Americans, we were here. Through the writing of the Constitution in 1787, we were here, to the addition of the Bill of Rights, to adding the Voting Rights Act. And I don't need to go through with you, Jonathan, first Reconstruction, Jim Crow, Brown versus the Board of Education, second Reconstruction. We're out here trying to get people to vote and letting them know that the history of the Republic itself is at stake when we ask them to vote. But the anger that I had after I read your book, again, it is a fantastic read. You cannot put it down when you start, is that it just seems that the internal petty, ego-driven, legacy-driven politics of the moment seem to be so more dominant than the little old lady who's trying to get to the polling place to save her Social Security, to fight for their Medicaid and their Medicare, and the poor who are fighting for their educational opportunities, who are students. It just seems like what you captured was something that we all know takes place. We've never seen it in black and white. And it just doesn't look like the people at the very top recognize how much we vested in that moment for our leadership to get it right. And given what's at stake and what has happened over the last 100 days, it couldn't be made more clearer than what you've accomplished in this work.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Yeah, I mean, the bonfire of the vanities that takes place in the Democratic Party in the last few months of 2024 is just breathtaking. And to your point, it's not about the little old lady that needs to get to the polls. It's not about the starving child who, by the way, I recall your father at one of the conventions talking about the inside of a starving baby's stomach being the same color no matter the color of their skin. And one of the more profound statements I think I've ever heard. It wasn't about the people. It wasn't about, they talked a lot about defending democracy, but they were unwilling to show how their version of democracy, how their view of democracy would help that little old lady trying to get to the polls, that would help the child that's starving, that would help the person who can't afford housing. And really what breaks down here as you see this, this fight develop over, what's going to happen with Biden and getting Harris in there is selfishness on the part of President Biden. I think one of my, I say favorite scenes in the book, but one of the favorite things that I think about a lot because I think it's so clarifying is that when Biden tells Harris that he's going to get out, it was originally reported they had a quick phone call. He said he was going to endorse her. What actually happened is they get on the phone. He says, I'm getting out. She says, are you sure you want to do that? He says, yes. She says, are you going to endorse me? And he says, you have my support, kid. And Congressman, you ask for an endorsement and you don't hear the word endorse back, there's a problem. And she's like, well, you've got to endorse me because I got to be able to start whipping the votes. Your delegates are going to be free. Obama and Pelosi want an open convention.
And it needs to happen very timely. It needs to happen right now, not a week from now or 4 days from now.
Well, and
part of your departure is my endorsement, right?
And that's what happens. Biden says, well, listen, I'm going to put out my statement today getting out, and in like 3 or 4 days, I'll endorse you. She's like, the whole thing's going to be over by then. Like, what do you mean in 3 or 4 days? And what Biden wanted was to take a victory lap. He wanted to tell the American people that he was voluntarily giving up power, compare himself to George Washington, bask in the glow of being center stage for a little while longer at the potential expense of his vice president becoming the nominee. And so they go back and forth for a while, and finally, she has persuaded him enough, and he says, all right, let's go back to our corners for a few minutes, and we'll get back on the phone. They get back on the phone a second time, and Biden says, okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to put out my statement, and then later today I will endorse you. Meanwhile, Biden calls Jim Clyburn, who's in South Carolina celebrating his birthday, and reads him the statement that Biden is going to put out. He wants to know what Congressman Clyburn thinks. And Congressman Clyburn says, it's a great statement, but you're missing something. And Biden's like, what am I missing? And he said, you're not endorsing Kamala Harris. What the heck's going on? And Clyburn has a phone call set up for that afternoon with Obama, and he knows Obama's going to try to rope him into doing this open convention thing. And so, you just see Biden putting himself above the interests of the party there. And, because all of the Democrats believe stopping Donald Trump is in the interest of the country, Biden putting himself above the interests of the country. And he's not the only one that does that. Obama's open convention idea and trying to keep his fingerprints off of it and keep his brand clean and all of that, that's pretty selfish. And you go through these players, and the two people that stand out to me as really not doing that, interestingly, are the key women in this story, which are, I think Pelosi had her eye on the North Star, which was trying to prevent Republicans from getting the presidency, the House, and the Senate. I'm not sure she went about it the right way necessarily. I'm not sure every move was perfect, but I think her North Star was true. And I think Kamala Harris's North Star was true. She supported the president who she worked for until the moment he dropped out. I think that she gave her best in the campaign. Her best was not good enough. But, there was not a point where you saw Kamala Harris trying to put herself above the interests of the Democratic Party and the.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, Jonathan Allen is going to be our special guest. We are going to continue to unpack his book, Fight, on the Jesse Jackson.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're going to want to sit down for this. The jumbo breakfast platter from Jack in the Box. No, seriously, it's so munch food. There's French toast sticks, grilled sausage patty, hash brown, and scrambled eggs, all for just $4.99. Get all this and so much more at Jack in the Box.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
There was an Anthony Davis sighting last night in the NBA playoffs. Davis had 27 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 block shots to lead the Dallas Mavericks to a 120-109 win at Sacramento. Last night was only the 9th game AD has played with the Mavericks since he was traded by the Lakers for Luka Doncic on February 2nd. The win eliminated Sacramento from the play-in round. Dallas plays at Memphis Friday night for the 8th and final seed in the Western Conference playoffs. A judge in Los Angeles approved a restraining order for former Rams defensive tackle Aaron Donald. Donald requested the order in an attempt to keep a woman from harassing him and his family. The 10-time Pro Bowler said the woman threatened his 3-year-old son in a Google chat message. Donald, who retired in 2023, also claims the woman has sent gifts, packages, and messages to his house. Sounds like something out of a movie. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
Founded in Los Angeles in 1986, litigation powerhouse Quinn Emanuel has deep roots in the Los Angeles community. Since 2007, we have litigated some of the largest fires on the West Coast. We are proud to be the only AmLaw 100 firm in the country to represent wildfire victims, giving affected individuals, families, and businesses the same focus and individualized attention we devote to our Fortune 500 clients. BTI Consulting has repeatedly recognized Quinn Emanuel as among the 4 law firms in-house counsel least likely to oppose in any litigation, and we are often deemed the most feared. And after securing over $80 billion for our clients in various matters firm-wide, we understand why. If you have been affected by the recent wildfires in Altadena and the Palisades and would like to discuss your situation further, please contact wildfire support at QuinnEmanuel.com or call us at 213-443-3050. Quinn Emanuel is proud to sponsor Conversation Live Altadena Rising with James Farr on KBLA Talk 1580.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
After producing an award-winning climate justice campaign in 2024, KBLA Talk 1580 has gone all in on its 2025 Climate Justice plus Black Health Initiative. April is Minority Health Month, and Urban Family Focus, in partnership with Providence Health Systems, presents The Heart of the Matter. Providence doctors and health equity officers will participate in informative and life-changing conversations on hypertension, health equity, behavioral health, and community engagement. Don't miss these empowering conversations on Urban Family Focus every Saturday in April at 7 and Sunday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Sponsored by Providence, Southern California's largest and most comprehensive health care network. We've got a lot to talk about on KBLA Talk 1580. Download the KBLA 1580 app or log in to KBLA1580.com. I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach, on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest, Jonathan Allen, the political reporter for NBC News. He and his writing partner, Amy Parnes, have written 3 New York Times bestsellers, HRC and Shattered, as well as his latest New York Times best-selling book, Fight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. Jonathan, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Congressman.
Jonathan, listen, I'm not going to let Nancy Pelosi off the hook as quickly as you did. She said, and this was her mantra, you say it in the book, he goes, she goes. It sounded like a nice rhyme, maybe from another era, maybe even a Jesse Jackson rhyme. But the fact of the matter is...
I know Hakeem Jeffries is stealing your act, stealing your family's act. What's going on with that?
He's got some rhymes now. His next career is rapping. The problem is it would have discounted African-American women and the central base of voters in the Democratic Party. To just skip over Kamala Harris was inconceivable for our base to go back and explain to that she had performed vice president for 4 years without any major problems, and then the party would have skipped over her. But that notwithstanding, Joe Biden then insists upon loyalty from Kamala Harris even as candidate Kamala Harris. I know when I ran for Congress, I almost ran for president. When I ran for Congress, there was some concern amongst people very close to me. They kept saying, Jesse Jr., you're trying to distance yourself from your father. I said, no, I'm not distancing myself from my father, but I am distinguishing myself and I am differentiating myself. Dad does this, and I represent the people of the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois. I'm not going to miss a vote while I'm in Congress. I'm going to distinguish myself from him because I grew up when people said to me that my dad didn't have a real job. Well, now I got a real job. I want to show everybody on the record that I'm actually doing it. But Joe Biden insisted, and every step along the way, including the View interview, Kamala Harris is struggling with, how is Joe Biden going to perceive my answer to this question? Help us here, John.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for making the point that you did about Pelosi and not having faith in Harris and trying to get rid of her. And it's an important point, and I glossed over it, right before the last break. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I never thought that there was any solution other than Kamala Harris. If Biden left, both knowing the rules of the Democratic Party and the mores of the Democratic Party, and knowing just how much blood would be left on the ground, to your point, with trying to skip over a black woman who was vice president. It was always inconceivable to me that it would end up as anybody other than her. And there's good reason that there would have been blood on the ground, because to your point, the strongest base of the Democratic Party since African Americans got the real right to vote in this country through the Voting Rights Act in 1965 has been black women. They show up, they show out, they bring their families to the polls, and it's just inconceivable that would have happened. But to your question about Biden, his hot breath was on Kamala Harris's neck for the entirety of her campaign. He said to her before she went to debate Trump, he said to her, "No daylight, kid." And forgetting for a second the paternalistic use of kid there, makes him sound kind of old, whatever, he is old. He was saying to her, he didn't want her to distance, and he didn't want her to differentiate. He wanted her to go forward with the campaign that he had built and the agenda that he had built. And there's an implicit threat in that, which is he's still the president of the United States. He still has the bully pulpit. If he doesn't want her to distance herself or differentiate herself, and she does, he has the ability to undercut her. he has the ability to grab national attention and become a problem for her. And so I think this was something that weighed heavily with her. I think she is naturally pretty loyal to him. And he didn't need to say that for her to be somebody who was respectful about him. But this was a change election, Congressman. I mean, the right track, wrong track numbers for Joe Biden were terrible. I mean, most of the country wanted a change, and he ran without offering a substantive change from what he'd been doing. He could have said, here's what I'm going to do in a second term that is different. He didn't do that. And then when Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, he handcuffs her and says, you can't do that either. And so what she ends up saying in the debate with Trump is, she's asked, what's the difference between her and Biden? And she says, background and experience. And those may be important characteristics, but the American people were looking for a change from inflation. They were looking for changes to make them feel more comfortable about their safety, about the ability to feed their kids and to plan their retirement. And she wasn't able. And look, I mean, people could argue about this all day long. I mean, I personally think she should have made more of an effort. I personally think she should have realized that it was about her at that point and no longer about Joe Biden, and told him to get in line. But she didn't do that, and she had this guy, the sitting president of the United States, telling her not to.
And therefore she couldn't be her authentic self. I mean, she had a right to talk about egg prices, to talk about the price of bacon, to talk about inflation, but she couldn't do that if Joe Biden was breathing down her neck, because it was on his watch that in fact these prices were increasing.
Right. She was not in a position. He didn't allow her to be in a position, and certainly, again, the implicit threat that he might retaliate in some way didn't allow her to be in the position to say, you know what, I think Biden's this administration hasn't done this right, and here's what we'll do, when I'm president, that will reduce your egg prices, your bacon prices, we'll make sure that your community's safe, make sure your kids' schools are better, all the things that people care about. This is sort of kind of highfalutin scholarly stuff, but I know you'll know what I'm talking about. Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
The sociology. When people feel threatened, and I think people did feel threatened in the last election in terms of economic security, they're going to turn to the person who is talking about economic security, physical security. They're not thinking about what is our form of government. They're thinking about, how is the person I'm voting for going to make my life easier, and certainly not make it harder.
What about Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act? That really wasn't about reducing inflation at all, was it?
No, it was a climate change bill.
It was a climate change bill, but he named it the Inflation Reductionary Act, and there was blowback from that. And Kamala had to defend his behavior for misnaming that legislation.
Yeah, I mean, it was not just misnaming it, but misnaming it with the intention to mislead. When inflation started happening, Biden said it wasn't there. There was no inflation. Then he said there was transitory inflation, whatever the heck that means. I mean, I've been studying politics and economics a long time, and it sounded like BS to me.
Yeah,
and I think it sounded like BS to voters. And then he hangs that name on the bill that everybody knows that's not what that bill is. Everybody knows that that's a climate change bill. And here's the thing: those might be laudable goals, but the American people are not dumb. They are going to understand when a politician is telling them BS, and they did.
I when we come forward, I know that I've got about 50 seconds before the break. I do want to deal with this trans issue because I was in Pennsylvania campaigning when it came up, and how it came back to haunt Kamala Harris from the Donald Trump side of the equation, how that all came about. I think our voters need to understand you have to get the book Fight, because if we're not on the same page, if you don't understand what really took place, we will be engaging in a fratricide. We'll be blaming blacks who didn't vote. We'll be blaming our Hispanic brothers and sisters. The fact of the matter is we voted in great numbers, but some decisions were made that impacted the quality of the candidate, the authenticity of the candidate, and it made it very, very difficult to sustain the campaign up until the final hour of voting. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Jonathan Allen.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, I'm Joe Montaigne. Let's talk about veteran homelessness, because it's not just a housing issue, it's a human issue. Right now, we need LA property owners to open their doors and give veterans a safe place to call home. With guaranteed rent and dedicated support, you can be part of the solution. Learn how you can help. Email houseourvets@lacity.org.
We ask seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Can your pad absorb everything and stay fresh? Always Radiant with Flex Foam can. Get up to 0 leaks, 0 odor, and 0 feel. Because Flex Foam is the only pad with a flexible foam core. You heard me, foam. Always Radiant is so thin, it feels like nothing, yet protects like nothing else. Can your pad do that? For up to 100% leak-free protection, try Always Radiant to see what Flex Foam can do for you.
Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. Sometimes we try to fit it all in. Sometimes we don't know what's in store. Sometimes we find what we're looking for. Sometimes we're rolling easy and free. Sometimes 1 and 1 makes 3. So much to love along this ride. That's why Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and Affiliates, Columbus, Ohio.
Lena Bloom for the Bail Project.
Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford bail and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail makes poverty a crime. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail. Because freedom should be free.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is an award-winning political reporter at NBC News. He previously worked as the Washington bureau chief for Bloomberg News and as White House bureau chief for Politico. He is the author of 3 New York Times best-selling books, HRC and Shattered, and now Fight, Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. Jonathan, before I get to my final few questions for you, I want to take care of a little bit of business. I want those of you who podcast, those of you who host radio shows to know how to get in touch via email with Harper Collins's agent who represents Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes, and at least give them an invitation to be on your shows. This is a very, very important book. And I know that Jonathan probably doesn't know at least what I feel about this book, that I think it's on its way to Pulitzer. Because no one covered the 1877 campaign, the Tilden Hayes Compromise, quite like this. And it's the small decisions that mattered in this election that had a profound impact in the small margins that we needed to defeat Donald Trump, which could have avoided everything that we're going through in the present. Jonathan Allen, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thanks, Congressman.
So I'm directing everyone to Megan.Wilson@HarperCollins.com, Megan.Wilson@HarperCollins.com. Jonathan, let me ask you this question. What was the biggest mistake from your perspective that Democrats made in the 2024 campaign?
I think the biggest mistake is the one that they are still making, which is that they have not offered an agenda for a modernized America. What I hear from Democrats is them defending, and not that they shouldn't defend the programs that they believe in, but it is all on defense. It is all anti-Trump. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be fighting Trump, but they have an anti-Trump coalition right now, and I don't think that's a good model for the future of the Democratic Party. I think there needs to be some robust debate in the Democratic Party about what is it that Democrats stand for going forward. How are they going to not just protect Social Security for the baby boomers, but make sure that it's there for the people who are our children's age? What are they going to do to make sure that healthcare costs come down, and that, whether that's universal single payer healthcare like Bernie Sanders wants, or some other form of reducing the cost of healthcare? How are they going to do that in the future? So I just look at, when we talked before about this being a change election and neither Biden nor Harris, and for different reasons, presenting a sort of change agenda, I think the Democrats are going to have to figure that out. And I suspect that will come in the form of one of their presidential candidates in the next cycle, that there will be, some desire for a forward-looking vision, and not just talking about a forward-looking vision, but taking some chances on policy. But I thought that was the biggest mistake. And then there were a million micro mistakes that flow from that.
I thought your detailing of the egos involved in the vice presidential selection process, from Josh Shapiro to J.B. Pritzker's amazing silence in Illinois, and the very lame excuse that he gave, I think I should remain neutral until the convention gets to Chicago. And now some of the other characters that have emerged during that process, could they be number two to Kamala Harris? And we interpret that to mean, are they prepared to be number two to a black woman? And therefore, it's clear that there are some Democrats who are incapable of being number two to a black woman. And then how she arrives at Walsh, who certainly suggests a loyalty to her that I think ultimately pitched the decision in his direction, because he appeared to be humble enough to be willing to work with Kamala and the direction of her campaign.
Yeah, he was thrilled to be nominated, right? And
the joy on the face of his son in the audience that day.
Yeah, I mean, this was a kick for him. I mean, he never saw himself in this position, and he was willing to be Kamala Harris's loyal number two. That doesn't mean that he was the best candidate out there. I think a lot of the people who would have made the best candidates or could have made the best candidates sort of absented themselves from the discussion. I think they were thinking about how do they run in 2028, and thinking that if they got in 2024 and the ticket loses, they won't have a chance in 2028. And if they get in and they win, they won't get a chance to run for president themselves until at least 2032. So all of these governors, other than Walz, all of these governors that we hear about that are the future of the Democratic Party, they wanted to hide when it was time to talk about the future of the Democratic Party.
I'm sitting here with my mouth wide open, because these are some of the most selfish decisions that were ever made at the hour that we needed people to step up and be for the country, to be for the party, given all that was at stake in the November election. They're thinking about their own political ambition. They're thinking about 2028. They're thinking about 2032. They're not thinking about the present. They're not thinking about the dangers that Donald Trump represents. They cannot humble themselves to be in the presence of a African-American woman who would be leading the ticket in order to save our democracy and to save our country. We can think about their own political selfish ambitions all we want to, but the reality is they didn't want to try and stick their finger in the dike to save the democracy at that hour. And the decisions, Jonathan, which I think you detail perfectly in the book Fight, are extremely selfish.
I mean, over and over and over again, it's the running theme: the selfishness, the arrogance, the unwillingness to put something else in front of them at a time when they're telling the American people that the world is going to end if Donald Trump gets elected. They're like, well, that's my second or third priority personally, but you all should go out and vote because it's an existential crisis for America. And I think it shined through at times. I believe this book does important work in terms of detailing exactly who made those selfish decisions and how they made them, and illuminating that for people that watch the election. But I think you could at least feel some of that as you watched it, even from afar. And so I think that this book confirms some suspicions and has a lot of new detail. But yeah, this is a huge problem for the Democrats in this particular election. And one thing we haven't talked about that I think bears quick examination is the sort of permanent consultant class that makes so many of these decisions. Biden gets out of the race, and Harris ends up keeping the same folks running the campaign, even though they were running a campaign that was losing to Trump. And what we saw, and I think you'll appreciate this. Barack Obama wins in 2008, and everybody who worked for him tells everyone else in the world that they're the genius that got Barack Obama elected. Whereas Barack Obama is a unique political talent who was running in a year where Republicans were angry at their own party. He wins the presidency, and all of a sudden it's like, well, it must have been, the David Plouffs and the Jen O'Malley Dillons and the guys that do that Pod Save America show on the West Coast now that got this guy elected. How could he have possibly done it without him? They know how to run campaigns, and they have been running Democratic campaigns since 2008. Did the 2012 campaign, which was not perfectly executed, even though Obama won. They basically ran the 20 campaign for Biden. They ran the 24 campaign, and some of them were running the 16 campaign, although the Clintons have their own set of people. So it was, a little bit of a mix. But basically 4 or 5 election cycles now, you've had the same cookie cutter campaigns. And, I think if I were the next Democratic presidential candidate nominee, I would think long and hard about whether you need fresh faces with fresh ideas for modern campaigns.
I was co-chairman of Barack Obama for United States Senator with the late Senator Paul Simon in the state of Illinois. We were the only 2 co-chairmen of that campaign, and we were great to celebrate with Barack when he won that tremendous victory. I was a national co-chairman of Barack Obama for president in 2008, and the only person whose name that you mentioned that I remember is David Plouffe. So there are a lot of people who take credit for Barack Obama bringing him forward, but I don't remember them in 2008. I certainly don't remember them in Chicago in 2006 and 2004, and I know they weren't there in 1995 when he beat Alice Palmer for the state Senate when I was elected to Congress in 1995. So there are a lot of new faces, a lot of people who are part of that consultant class who are deeply problematic. The book is Fight by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes. You need to get it today on Amazon.com. The audiobook on Audible is just as compelling. I got up and started listening to it again at 2:30 this morning. I finished right before the show, 11 hours and about 12 minutes. It is fascinating, and you cannot claim to critique, analyze, or handicap the race in 2024 without understanding how a little old lady who was on her walker was going up to vote. She had fought for civil rights. She had fought for human rights. And if she knew what was going on in the background of the Democratic Party that led to the nomination of Kamala Harris and the constraints that had been placed on her as a candidate by all of the Democrats, she would have probably turned around and not voted at all. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. My very, very special guest has been Jonathan Allen. Jonathan, the very best with this book. Please give my best to Amy.
I will do that, and thank you so much, Congressman.
It's our pleasure. Looking forward to having you back sometime, friend.
Anytime.
You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Until next time.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
You're going to want to sit down for this. The jumbo breakfast platter from Jack in the Box. No, seriously, it's so munch food. There's French toast sticks, grilled